This question is from arguably our most prolific Q&A, who I finally met in person. Dad ass is my boss, Chris.
A real question, Smith.
Yeah. And not to say I'm going to discourage you from submitting questions with the CU Podcast Topics Twitter hashtag. We get some. There was a run at one point where we didn't get a lot of quality questions, we'll just say. But we get some good ones, like more consistently now. The question is, does the current passion of video game preservationists and archivists suggest that games are the most well-preserved art form of our time? And going forward, does this level of preservation set a solid example for other forms of art, film, music, etc. to follow? What do you think, Ian?
I don't know that they are the most well-preserved art form of our time, but I do agree that video game preservationists and the archivists, especially the ones that we have out there right now doing the work that they're doing, Frank, Steve Lynn, people like that, Frank Cifaldi, Steve Lynn,
Video Game History Museum,
Ziba
Play,
the people who are gathering all this info, making sure it's stored.
Large collectors, you can put them in there too. They're making sure they're stored. And
yeah, all of these people are doing a fantastic job of making sure this stuff doesn't disappear. And I think that the passion that these people exhibit and the reason why it's so prominent is I think it's because they. And just preservation of games in general is something that's talked about so much right now, is because I think people realized they had to step in and do something about it at just the right time.
Sure.
Before there are still things from video games past that we may never know the full answers of, but we get this sort of stuff. People started collecting this data and marking it down in the video game history books right as little things were just starting to kind of float away into the past. You get what I'm saying? Like, just as we were getting to that point where we were starting to lose some of the history of games, people are like, okay, we can't lose this. We have to hold on to this. Basically, I think it happened just in time, and it was brought up to the forefront, and now people are very much into making sure that all of this is collected and stored. So I think that's why it's such a prominent thing that people notice. Most well preserved, maybe not, but I do think
Well, how do you define it? What does that mean?
I don't know.
There's probably on every console, we probably have a working library of at least one example of each game in every single console.
I don't think we're there yet.
You don't think we have that?
No.
For every major video game console, we don't have at least one person with one working copy of each game? What console do you think we're deficient on having a working example of?
I thought you meant games, like in general. There's plenty of PC games and things like that there's just no examples of.
If
we're talking consoles, maybe. If we're talking PC stuff.
You're talking a random IBM DOS game made in Minnesota in 1986? Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, if you want to get that far, but then how far removed are you from just saying that's someone one-off homebrew that someone just made in their house? I understand what you're saying.
I'm not arguing it. I'm just saying that.
But then you're getting to a philosophical conversation saying, is every piece of music preserved because someone in Wyoming made a little ditty that must have been good, but 5 people heard it?
All I'm saying is I'm just saying I don't know if it's the most well-preserved art form of our time.
I'm saying that's even hard to even structure or frame that question.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
No, I agree.
But I'm talking about for every major console release, we know every game that came out.
Oh, sure. Yeah, from NES
and
forward.
And we have questions about some, like Steam events, or was this Neo Geo game really a U.S. version, or was it just European? Like, we have those questions. I'm
referring to stuff like release dates and things like that. Exactly.
That's what you mean. Yeah, you're talking about
No, I'm talking about preservation in terms of history and all of it.
Okay.
That's sort of stuff that we've started to lose. Like the exact release date of Super Mario Brothers is something that's always
we're within a week or two.
Yeah, that's always a great example. And I think it was when people started to realize, okay, we don't exactly know this sort of stuff. That's when preservation sort of kicked into high gear. That's what I mean. Like, we just started to lose that sort of info because it was never really marked or kept down.
Sure.
So what I'm saying is it kicked in just in time. I think going forward, I think people who are into these sorts of hobbies now realize that other people aren't going to do this for you. You have to be the people who write down what's happening in your hobbies. You have to archive the
Sure.
information yourself, because this has become, I find it very interesting in games. It really is the community is doing a lot of work towards the preservation of
Yes,
games,
because-
more so than other
Because
hobbies.
the companies
I think.
haven't given a shit.
Right.
The one thing I'll say, we're definitely not. Video games is I don't want to say by far not close to being the most thorough, just because when you look at the major companies, they, for example, like games that are in semi-development or prototypes, game companies haven't given a shit about that. They looked at it as just like, well, it's just, who cares? It's like a toy. We're just getting rid of it.
Right.
So these are found at garage sales. These are found in people's collections. Some are still not dumped. Some games are still not found. Games that you should at least have some semblance of what the game looks like besides, random ass screenshots.
Right.
The Virtual Boy Virtual Boy New Japan Pro Wrestling game.
Yeah.
I don't think that ROM's dumped.
I don't think so.
And people are like, well, was that sold? And that's from that's a major system. It was the biggest Japanese wrestling organization. Why do we not have that somewhere? Is two people have that somewhere? Does Liger have a copy he was given? Did he toss it out? But these are real questions. But when in other industries, though, we look at like music or movies. In terms of stuff gets lost in fires. Like we've lost tons of movies. Don't get me wrong. We lost half the movies from before 1940 are gone.
Yep.
Forever. That's a fucking tragedy. But when you look at the people didn't care at the time, but also the film was flammable. But it's not like they went out and actively threw it out. There's been massive fires on studios every decade. Like there's all the cutscenes from Highlander that were lost in a fire. That movie's only 30 years old, and we will never see those scenes.
Right.
For example, but they've tried to preserve that stuff, at least. Like they've actively tried to preserve. Studios wouldn't just toss out their old footage necessarily. For the Doctor Who, like BBC stuff, they taped over. They didn't think people cared. But that's the exception, at least in my knowledge. When it comes to music, though, they have all those fucking lost recordings. The major studios would hold on to all that shit.
Right.
They have shit coming out. I mean, Tupac dead 30 years, and they're going to be putting out his recording still. So I think it's the nature of what's the industry doing this. And I hate to say it, maybe they thought that we could make money off of these Beatles, little one-off recordings, and they eventually all come out. They sing for like a minute and a half and throw something together. Oh, we'll put that out. We'll make money off of that.
Yeah.
For some reason, the video game industry never saw that. They never thought, well, maybe people 30 years now want to hear about this game we had development. Maybe there's like a playable level. I guess they never envisioned that.
Sure.
As an idea. For them, maybe it's like having a half put together G.I. Joe figure. No one's gonna want it.
Well, and it's just the perception of video games and the perception of the industry and what they mean to people and what they are.
And it's the latest and last form of art and entertainment, you can say, that we've come across.
Sure.
In our society. It might be the final frontier. I can't picture another medium at this point. We'll get to the hologram stuff I was talking about. Lenticular games. I don't know.
Lenticular
You
games.
have to wave your head back and forth to play it that way. I don't fucking know what I'm talking about. What was I going to say? I don't know. I still don't know who made fucking X-Men on the NES. Still don't know what developer that is.